It's not really about getting rid of the ego. It's about being able to calmly observe the ego and see its falsity. Welcome to today's movie gathering of Wonder Woman 1984, sorry, 1984, I think it is. Lovely to have you all here today. And so I love Wonder Woman because Wonder Woman is really a great set of movies for opening into the power of the mind. And initially, when we start to go on the spiritual journey, we want to really start to look at this backwards cause and effect that the ego has set up in this world. And so as you're going through your day initially, as you may, initially start the spiritual journey or start your journey of healing, seemingly, you start to find that how all of the annoyances and all of your pleasures and all of your upsets are based on something in perception. This may look like, being upset because a driver cut you off and you're late to work. It may be because your spouse is annoying you. Your spouse may be snoring and you two are sleeping together, and all of a sudden, the ego in your mind's going, "Oh my God, I wish they would just shut up." But you can begin to see how initially the cause of the upsets and even the cause of the temporary pleasures that you seem to experience day to day are always based on the cause being on the world. Now, this is how it seems to be when the mind has totally forgotten about the light of source, the light of love, the light of your true being, and even forgotten about the level of the mind. And now the mind is so focused on form, so focused on perception, so focused on specifics that it has totally forgotten about the true level of cause, which is the level of mind. And so as we are going about our day, we seem to be reacting and responding to all of the stimuli of the world without even questioning, what actually am I experiencing? What do I really want to experience? So on and so forth. And so initially, we want to be able to start to pull those projections back to the level of mind. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. And the movie Wonder Woman 1989 is such a sweet and such a beautiful example of this because it portrays the core desire of the level of the mind. Now, Jesus said when he was going around talking, you often hear quotes of what Jesus said, and one of them was, "Let thine eye be single." Now, what he was really talking about here is having a singular focus for peace, having a singular focus for placing that goal out front of forgiveness as we start and as we are applying the spiritual teachings in our life, to be able to come to an experience of consistent peace, which is the true self. It's just another name for the true self. And so going back to the level of perception, let's say we're going to run through this. I'm going to take you through how the levels of the mind work just very quickly so we can get a clear and simple understanding of how we can trace our upsets and how we can trace the temporary pleasures seen in the world back to the level of the mind so we can experience true fulfillment and true peace through overlooking later on the false effects of the ego. So let's use the example of, our spouse is snoring and I seem to be so upset and so annoyed at them snoring that we want to be able to start to pull this projection back. So we have the perception of the upset, which is our spouse is snoring and I feel super upset and super annoyed at that snoring. So that will be the perceptual level of the upset. But now we want to ask ourselves, how am I feeling right now? As we know, emotions are a barometer to what is actually happening on the level of the mind. And so as we are bringing our attention back initially, even in my own experience, I had to start to pay attention to how I was feeling moment to moment to moment throughout the day, so I could start to get in touch with what was underneath the level of perception. And so we can ask ourselves in any single moment of upset, how am I feeling right now? Now, of course, the upsets are going to be, the emotions will be upset, lack of peace, annoyed, frustrated, angry. These are all different expressions or false effects of the ego. And these are perfectly fine. Acknowledging this is what we want to begin to open up to, because initially vulnerability and just becoming aware of those emotions is the initial step to lead you back inwards into invulnerability. And so as we are just paying attention to the perceptual level and we begin to ask ourselves, how am I feeling right now? We can begin to look at the deeper levels and keep reeling that projection back to the core desire or the core focus on the mind level. And so as we know, emotions are an effect of perceptions. Now, what is underneath emotions? It'll be the thoughts. And so as you are paying attention to the thoughts, you can begin to inquire into yourself, with yourself, what thoughts are arising in my mind right now? What are the type of thoughts that are in my mind? And these thoughts may be, there shouldn't be sleeping. I wish there wasn't sleeping because then I could be peaceful. Oh my God, if I was in a different room, then I would be peaceful. Oh my gosh, I want to kick them out of the room so I can have the bed to myself and not experience this snoring, so I can be at peace and sleep. And so these may be example of the ego's thinking that is arising in awareness for you, that we can begin to look at. Now, this is beautiful because in terms of experiencing consistent peace, initially, while the mind seems to be split and experiencing itself as an ego, we want to remember to begin to place the one purpose of forgiveness in A Course in Miracles, or in non-dual terms, it's called self-inquiry. We want to place that one purpose out front, no matter what seems to be happening. Now, we want to ask ourselves, do I really want to sleep right now? Or since there is an upset coming up, do I really want to get in touch with what is arising for me so I can release that? And then even if there is snoring, even if there isn't snoring, I can be with what is. And a funny thing about these thoughts is, as you are paying attention to the thoughts, you will notice how the thoughts have one thing in common. They are always resistance thoughts. They are always thoughts of resistance. They are always thoughts describing what is not. Now, if you know Byron Katie has this beautiful worksheet, and she's always talking about loving what is. But you will notice that if you pay attention to these thoughts are always based around what is not happening. And the focus in that moment is on a mental image that the ego is displaying in the mind of what is not happening. Now, this mental image, in A Course in Miracles terms, you can basically describe as hypothetical thinking. Now, hypothetical thinking, for those that don't know what hypothetical thinking is, really just what if. It's an imagined and mentally created idea in the mind of how something should be, that little picture you have in your mind of how something should be, rather than paying attention to how something is right now unfolding. And that's the difference. That's what spirituality is about being being able to open to discern between what is mentally created images and what is actually happening right now on the form level. But this is still a stepping stone to going deeper. And so as you begin to notice these resistance thoughts, as you begin to notice these thoughts that are projecting the cause out onto effect and making the effect the cause, you can begin to notice, well, these thoughts are really unloving. These thoughts can't be a reflection of the spirit, the true self. So these must be coming from the ego. That is the only other seeming separate entity that seems to be there on the level of the mind, not really, but as a stepping stone metaphor, that these thoughts could be stepping from. And so since there are only two purposes on the mind, the ego and the true self, in this metaphor, we want to begin to trace these thoughts back into who is actually saying these thoughts. And of course, you can begin to place, saith the Lord after these, after the words. So you can say, okay, I have this thought, man, I wish the snoring would stop. And then you can say, saith the Lord. Now you can begin to make it really obvious in that moments you put it that way, but this isn't coming from the spirit. This must be coming from the ego. And so this is a great discernment technique, just to be able to get in touch with who is actually saying what. Because remember, the whole point of spirituality is just to discern between what you are not and begin to overlook that so you can begin to reveal what you are. Now, for me, especially for me, when I was on the spiritual journey seems to be taken in a way that we are trying to get rid of the ego. Because everything else we do in the world is always based on doing something with the body. When it comes to forgiveness and the spiritual journey, seemingly, we come at the spiritual journey with the same mentality. Oh, I must attain future enlightenment through getting rid of my ego. But we want to get really clear on what forgiveness actually is. And forgiveness is really just another way of looking. It's not really about getting rid of the ego. It's about being able to calmly observe the ego and see its falsity. And to use an analogy to help me convey what I'm saying here is, if you are the sky, you can imagine yourself as being the beautiful, pristine, expansive sky. And if there are clouds arising in the sky, you can begin to see how, because you are the sky and that there is something arising within you, there is the temptation to believe that you are actually the clouds. And this is because the clouds are separate from you. And so you can see the clouds as something separate from your true self, which is being the sky. And then all of a sudden, your expansive identity that is limitless in nature gets shrunken down to this one cloud that's passing through. And then you've got this upset. You're jumping on the train of these egoic thoughts. You're jumping on the train of these clouds, thinking that these clouds are you, when they are just emotions arising through you. They are just thoughts arising through you. They arise and they disappear. They arise and they disappear. Another one arises and they disappear. But did you arise to disappear with the thought? Did you arise to disappear with the emotion? No, you still exist. When the emotion disappears, when the emotion of sadness disappears from your awareness, you still exist, which goes to show you that you are something beyond that sensation of, let's say, sadness, that you can begin to be like, oh my God, if I exist prior to the emotion of sadness arising, if I exist during the emotion or sensation of sadness arising, and if I exist after that sensation or emotion of sadness has disappeared from my awareness, can I really be the sad one? And this is the beautiful and sweetness of the fruits of inquiry, because you can begin to see, oh my goodness, maybe I'm not that. Maybe I'm not those emotions. Maybe those perceptions aren't mine. Maybe even the thoughts that are arising in my mind aren't my thoughts. And this is where we are going, through allowing us to get in touch with our emotions, through allowing the mind, through allowing one to get in touch with the thinking that is arising in mind. We can begin to get in touch with what is actually the ego and what is actually the true self, or the dreamer of the dream. And so as we are paying attention to these thoughts, and we're having all of these realizations and insights as we are inquiring, or even if there aren't any realizations, that's fine too. It's just allowing what's arising. We can begin to ask ourselves, okay, what is some of the beliefs underneath those thoughts that may be there in mind? If I'm experiencing an upset on the level of perception with snoring, and I've gone through the emotions, I'm looking at the thoughts, what would be some of the beliefs that would be underneath the thoughts? And then, with me, when I was going through my own inquiry during my own healing, I would just sit there and be like, okay, true self, okay, spirit, okay, intuition, show me what are the beliefs, show me what I need to see. What do I need to see? And then I would just sit quietly and patiently and wait for a thought to be given. Because at this point in time, I had no clue about what beliefs were. My mind had been so focused on specifics, beliefs, what is that? And so I would just sit quietly and I would wait for a belief to come through. And all of a sudden I might get feeling like a victim. I'd be like, oh my God, of course. A belief can be, I believe I am a victim. What are some other beliefs? I believe I am a victim. I believe that I'm being unfairly treated. I believe that the snoring shouldn't happen for me to be peaceful and happy. I believe something should change in the world for me to feel complete, happy, and peaceful. And then if you sit very quietly, you may begin to open into how the one belief, which is really all the other beliefs stem from, is that I believe I am separate from God. I believe I am separate from source. I believe I am separate from love, from happiness, from my true self. But we will come back to this later on. And so as we begin to inquire and have all of these insights into the beliefs, we can begin to inquire into, okay, now that I have looked at the beliefs, we are going to touch on the core desire, the core focus that is underneath the beliefs. Because remember, the ego is just a belief. But if you are beyond the ego, then there has to be something beyond the beliefs even. And this is the desire, your core focus. And so this is what Wonder Woman is truly about. It's such a beautiful movie about this core desire, this core focus. And in each seeming upset you seem to be experiencing, you can always pause to ask yourself, what do I want to experience? What do I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on the snoring stopping to be peaceful? Or do I just want to be peaceful right now? Do I want to experience peace, or do I want to experience lack of peace? Now, if we use the analogy of a apple tree, you get apple trees from apple trees, and you get pear trees from pear trees, seemingly. I have no clue, but that's just using this for analogy. I have no clue if pear trees come from pear trees. But really, if we look at this logic, I'm really pointing to the logic behind here. Pear trees come from pear trees and apple trees come from apple trees. And so if you are focusing on lack of peace rather than peace, that's simple logic, because what is peace is lack of peace. What is not peace is lack of peace. And so if you do not want peace, then the only experience that can result from that is lack of peace. And we seem to go about our daily experience going, why am I so upset? Why am I so not at peace? Even though we don't really want to be peaceful, because what is not peace is always lack of peace. And so this is what we will be unraveling throughout this movie session today, is beginning to come back to that core desire of what do I want to experience? What is my purpose? Do I want to experience peace in this moment? Or do I want the snoring to stop in order to be peaceful? Because there are only ever two purposes on the level of the mind, whether you call it ego and the true self, whether you call it the ego and the Holy Spirit, peace, lack of peace, love or fear. There are only ever two purposes on the mind level. Now that's beautiful. That's a cause for joy, because that brings it back to the simplicity. That brings it back to the sweetness and the fruits of the simplicity of the moment. Because then you can begin to be like, wow, instead of beginning to choose between all of these different options, I only have two options to choose between. All of the options in the world are just a projection of these two purposes on the level of the mind. And so if we look at these two purposes, the ego's purpose is always for something in the world to change, to be peaceful, to be complete, to be happy. But the Holy Spirit's purpose, the Spirit's purpose, the true self's purpose, is always there reminding you, hey, here I am. Peace never left you. Rest here with me in peace. And you can begin to see that inquiring into the core focus, or the core desire, you can begin to see how this upset first began to look like I was upset because there was snoring there. But bringing it back to the level of the mind and the level of desire, you can begin to open to how that I am experiencing an upset because I have a split desire in my mind of how I want the snoring to stop, rather than just to be peaceful right now. In order, and how do we switch from that split desire to that singular desire for peace? How do we go from being annoyed at the snoring to actually just being able to be like, maybe I don't need the snoring to stop? And for me, as I was going through my journey, the intuition would just, ask me or prompt me or nudge me. And basically, this is the idea that would come to mind. Can I be wrong about my split desire that the snoring needs to stop for me to be peaceful? Can I raise that up and just be like, can I hand that over? Can I imagine me taking the split desire and just placing it on the flame, on the fire of love, and being like, maybe I don't even need the snoring to stop to be peaceful. Maybe the snoring can be there, but maybe I can choose peace regardless of the form. And this is the sweet gateway into choosing again, from going from that split desire of I need the snoring to stop to maybe I can just choose peace now. Maybe if the snoring did stop, will I still be completely happy? No. There would be something else that come up that would take away your seeming happiness. And so this is all a different way of just restating that we are flipping around cause and effect. We are reversing cause and effect. Because when the mind has forgotten about the light of heaven, the light of the true self, the light of source, and forgotten about the level of the mind, the power of the mind, the power of the present moment, and is so focused on specifics that you can begin to see how it totally feels like a victim of the world. And this is because the ego has has said, you have separated from your source. You have separated from your cause. You being a child of that cause, you being a child of source, have separated from that source. And now the ego says, okay, now the cause is the world and the effect is your state of mind. Whatever the cause, whatever happens in the world will affect your state of mind. And so we seem to go through our day reacting and responding to the images on the movie theater screen, forgetting that I am so powerful, forgetting that I am the power of the mind, and I am in complete control of everything that I seem to experience moment to moment to moment. And the reason why the mind is so focused on specifics and so focused on reacting to the images on the movie theater screen is because I don't want to take responsibility for my state of mind. I believe that if I go back to that core belief in separation, I'm going to be so smited, I'm going to be so punished that I would rather react and respond to the movie theater screen to punish myself, feeling like a victim, rather than going back to the level of the mind to look at and begin to realize the divine innocence through looking at that false belief of separation. To use an example of this, what I'm trying to convey here is, if we use the movie The Lion King with Simba and Simba's father, you know how Scar pushes Simba's father off of the cliff and he ends up dying, and then Simba goes and rushes to his father to see that he's dead. Well, this is very much like the false belief in separation. Scar says to you, oh, you've killed your father. You better run away, because if you go back to Pride Rock, you're going to get punished. They're going to punish you for killing Mufasa. And the guilt of that false belief in separation, that guilt from that lie, because as we know through watching the movie, Simba didn't kill the father. Simba was innocent. Simba didn't do anything wrong. It was Scar who really killed the father. It was Scar, in this analogy, that seemed to kill Mufasa. But since Scar, he's that little trickster in the mind, he said to Simba, oh, look what you've done. And you can see how the misperception comes in from this point of view. If you believe that one foundation, that one lie of how you killed Mufasa, you are going to experience the false effect of that, which is guilt. And then all of a sudden, you've got the false effects of this false belief, which is the unloving thoughts in the mind, the roller coaster of emotions that arise in your awareness emotionally, and the distorted and the fragmented perceptions of the world. And all of a sudden, you're reacting and responding to the movie theater screen, totally forgetting how you are wanting the upset, how you are wanting everything you seem to experience. Because the ego is in the mind going, oh, if you ever go back to that scenario of where you killed the father, you're going to be punished. But the spirit, the true self, is telling you, beloved, if you go back there, you are going to see your divine innocence. You are going to see how Simba, you are so innocent and you are so loved, and how you never did anything wrong, that if you go back to Pride Rock, you are going to be the rightful king of everything the light touches. And so, using this analogy, you can kind of open to the realization how all of the seeming upsets that I seem to experience day to day are just a projection of the one upset of the false belief of separation, believing I separated from the Father. I truly did that, and now I am guilty of that, because if I ever go back there, I'm going to get punished. And so I now want to play out the belief in the victimization. I want to play out the belief in being a victim so I can punish myself for what I believe I did, rather than be smited by source. And so here we are just reversing cause and effect through reeling in the projections that the ego seems to project out onto the movie theater screen. We can begin to reverse cause and effect and be like, hey, maybe I am in full control of everything I seem to experience, everything I seem to experience moment by moment by moment. Maybe I am not at the victim of the world. Maybe I am not at the mercy of the world. That is a truly freeing experience, because then what does that imply? That implies the immediacy of enlightenment, the immediacy of peace, the immediacy of salvation. Maybe I don't even need the world to change, because if I don't need the world to change and I can choose peace this moment, then that totally cuts out the idea of time needed to be peaceful, right? The only reason why I want to play out the belief in the victim and am so angry at the sound of snoring is because why? I want to play out this belief in the victim. But Jesus doesn't even stop there. You know, he's going to go prior to the sound. We are going prior to the sound. We are going prior to the false belief of separation. And so how could you even be upset at a sound of snoring unless you believe that there was actually a sound? And how do you know that that sound is annoying, you know? But through past learning. So you can see how this all entwines into like a little spider web, where we have to kind of deconstruct the spider web to see that the entirety of it is false. And so as we begin to look at that belief in separation and overlook it, that's what true forgiveness means. Forgiveness in the truest sense means overlooking the ego entirely. Now, another way of restating overlooking just means how I was stating before of maybe I can be wrong about my split desire that the snoring needs to stop in order to be peaceful. Maybe I can just choose peace right here and right now. Maybe the peace that I choose here is unconditional. You can see that if I get very miracle-minded and I begin to choose peace in every single moment to moment to moment, the peace that I am becomes so unconditional that I totally lose interest in changing the world anymore. I lose focus in trying to change my brothers to be peaceful. I lose focus in trying to change the world to be peaceful, because I am so caught up in the attraction to the power of the mind, the power of the moment, that I know that I can choose peace, I can choose love, regardless of what is appearing on the form. Now, people often ask me, you know, beloveds often ask me, if I choose peace and I forgive the snoring, then that must mean the snoring will stop. And really, we're beginning to touch on the script is written here. Now, the script is written as an idea or a metaphor that the Course uses in order to allow the mind to just keep going higher and higher up the ladder and the rungs of the ladder. If we think of A Course in Miracles, if we think of spiritual teachings like a ladder, we have to start at the very bottom. You know, you can't just jump to the highest rung of the ladder and be like, okay, let's just spring onto the roof now. You got to start from the very bottom of the ladder and rung by rung, slowly move your way up the ladder while you believe you are at the bottom and the ladder is necessary. And so as you move your way up the ladder, you're going to have these metaphors which will keep pushing you higher and higher and higher in mind, so you can begin to experience the heightlessness or the limitlessness of the joy of the true self. And so as we begin to touch on the script is written, the script is written is more like a metaphor to convey the past tense. The script is written is really emphasizing the word written. And to use an analogy, when we are watching a movie on a movie theater screen, to say that the script is written is the same as saying that the movie is already over and done. You can't begin to change the movie because it's already, all the actors have already acted out the movie. The script has already been written, and the actors are just acting it out. It's already been put onto the film, the DVD, and now it's just being projected from that DVD onto the white movie theater screen. Now, this is the same as saying that the script is written, because when you are watching a movie, you can't change the movie. No matter how hard you begin to yell at the movie theater characters, no matter how hard you try to change the movie theater characters, the script is still going to be the script, and everything is still going to play out how it seems to play out. Our only choice is in how we are going to perceive the movie, how we are going to watch the movie, through the lens of the ego and lack of peace, or through the lens of the true self and peace, regardless of what seems to be happening on the movie theater screen. And so using this analogy, you can begin to see that if I begin to choose peace moment to moment to moment to moment, then I can begin to be at peace regardless of what seems to be happening on the movie theater screen. And this is this is a true joy, because you are not a victim of the movie theater screen. I am always responsible for my own state of mind, and the direction of my state of mind is always in my control. That is the only thing that can be controlled, your state of mind, or how you perceive the movie. But you can't always control the events of the world. You can't always control what is happening on the movie theater screen. And this is beautiful because we are beginning to open up to the unconditionalness. We are beginning to open up until the limitlessness and the ever-presentness of the peace that is the true self. The peace, the love, the joy, the serenity, the calmness that is the true self. And so looking at this upset of using this analogy of the snoring, this is such a sweet experience, because then you can open to the experience of, wow, maybe I can use the snoring to get in touch with the true self and forgive the ego. And maybe I can use this nighttime experience just to choose peace, rather than the split desire of needing the snoring to stop to wanting peace and to wanting to sleep. Because if we look at the idea of the desire of wanting the snoring to stop, why would we want that? To sleep, right? But I tell you, if your eye is not single, if your eye is split, and your eye is split in focus or attention, then you are going to experience the false effects of that split desire, which is lack of peace. Because if you want to sleep more than you want peace, then I can guarantee you that that is going to come at the cost of your peace. Jesus says that the wages of sin is death. Now, to reinterpret this in spiritual terms today, we can begin to say that the cost of believing the ego is lack of peace. The wages of sin is death. That's what that means. The cost of believing unloving thoughts, the cost of believing the ego and mind is lack of peace, is upset, is hell, basically. And being in that experience of upset, being in that experience of hell is like death, because you're trying to be something that you are not. It is that simple. It's very simple when we bring it back to the simplicity of using very simple words and bring it back to the simplicity of the moment. And so I just want to open it up now to everyone to see if they want to share anything before we actually do start the movie. So we'll just have a short moment of prayer. And if you want to share anything that is on your mind or on your heart, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself now and share away with all of us. Okay. Would anyone like to share their experience or share their thoughts or any insights or what they had come to mind during that movie?
Yeah, there's definitely, yeah, just really points at the deep core. I feel it. And I think what I feel the most of it is like, okay, I still have these wishes, and um, yeah, somehow it just keeps. I feel like keeps pointing back to, yeah, just follow your heart and give these wishes over to me, and I'll use them, and yeah, it will just be worked with. It's like I can't even um yeah, deny that they're there. uh that feels like some bypassing, um and yeah, it's just beautiful because it all, yeah, the movie just really shows like, yeah, that's just give it back. That was the line that I kept hearing. um I'm not going to give it back. And and yeah, just this bit of willingness that, and that I'm just like, okay, I here is my willingness, and then you just work, yeah, work with it, just take it and unwind me from it. It's like I can't even give it back myself from that place of like, I have to give it back, or I should do something, I have to do this, I can't have these wishes, or like I'm just gonna, like you said in the beginning, like I'm just place it all on the altar or in his hands, and in that I feel like, okay, it comes back to trust that that it's just all arranged. And yeah, what was so beautiful was that uh, that even with everything that the man, gold, black, forgot his name, black, yeah, the villain basically, that after all that, like in just a split moment, just a moment, his everything was forgiven, just with him giving it over. And there was still all this guilt and all that, but that's where it was coming to so that he could face this deep hurt and guilt, and something that he had been pushing down and denying. And then is once he basically invited in this gentleness, his son reflected that with with unconditional love. And so it was like immediately the answer was given, and he didn't even have to do anything for it. He didn't have to go makes things happen in the world. He just had to give it over, and then right there, immediately, the answer was given. But all the guilt was still coming up, and so it just showed me like, okay, yeah, the answer is given right now, and now the spirit is just working with the mind as long as the belief is still there of guilt and sin. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. As I like to say, spot on. That's it. You know, what was beautiful was his change of heart. You know, he did everything he did because he thought it was going to bring him salvation, because he thought it was going to bring him peace and completion. But in that moment when Diana was speaking to the world and speaking to him, you know, it was the love underneath that connected with him, that basically saved him in that moment. It was the love for his child that allowed him to have that change of heart. And what I love about this movie is that's what forgiveness is. It's just a change of heart. It's not about, as you said, you know, which was so beautifully said as well, like, you know, it's not about getting rid of the ego. It's not about getting rid of the split desires. You know, it's more about that change of heart and how you don't really have to do anything, as you beautifully said, of just like, you don't have to do anything. It's not like a time process. It's not like a future goal, you know, because whenever we seem to come on the spiritual journey, you know, the goal of enlightenment, the goal of inner peace, the ego projects that out into a future goal and says, well, if I learn more spiritually and I self-improve myself, then in the future, over time, I will become peaceful. I will become enlightened. I will become perfect. But that is all a projection of a false sense of self, you know? And this beautiful ending that we just saw reflects how we don't need to do anything except just have a change of heart, to have a change of the way that we perceive. Because, you know, as we begin to look at the desire center, as we go back to that desire center, it's all about, what do you want to experience? What do you want to experience? Do you want love? Or do you want something other than love, which results in lack of love, a lack of peace? Do you want peace? Or do you want something other than peace? You know, what was his goal? His goal was to have people impressed by him. He was maintaining that he was holding up that self-image of wanting people to like him, to approve of him, because he didn't approve of himself. So you can see that the underlying purpose underneath that, which is the ego's purpose, is through some external use of validation. You know, everything one seems to do in the ego's purpose always involves some external means in order to reach that perceived goal. And this is the same as saying that, and the ego says that the means and the end are separate, that cause and effect are separate and apart. But as we are beginning to see, we don't have to do anything, which totally cuts out that belief in time, that false belief in time, where the means and the end come back together and are seen as together, because there is no time involved. It's simultaneous, it's instantaneous. As soon as you have an unloving thought that you believe in mind, is the instant you will see it reflected in perception. that you will experience the false effects of that unloving thought reflected in the world. And what I love about this beautiful movie is that that stone in the movie is the symbol of your mental wish, your core focus, or your core desire that we were talking about at the very start. Because you are always receiving what you ask for. Jesus said, ask and ye shall receive. As you sow, so shall you reap. But the fact is, you are always receiving what you ask for. Whether you are asking for the past to be repeated, which is just another way of saying believing in the ego, and that brings lack of peace. Or if you are wanting a singular desire for peace, if you are wanting to let thine eye be single, if you are wanting only love, then you will experience only love. And you are always receiving what you ask for on a being level, on that mental level. Because what you do comes from what you think. Therefore, whenever we get into behavior modification, if we look at religion, it's always act like Christ rather than think like Christ. It's always behavior modification. If only I do these amount of rituals, then I shall appease God. But what is most important through this movie is that what we do comes from what we think. Therefore, if the actions are involuntary from the level of the mind, we really want to get in touch with what is going on in our mind, right? If we are experiencing unloving thoughts, then the effects of those unloving thoughts, the emotions, perceptions, and the actions are involuntary. That's why it's so important to get in touch with what is going on the level of the mind and do that seeming inner work, which is still a metaphor, because the true you is perfect. It doesn't really need to do any inner work to be what it is. And that's the beautiful thing, because the villain, as you said, I forgot his name, but his motto was, life is good, but it can be better, right? There is that purpose of more. And underneath that purpose of more, wanting bigger, better, more, is the belief that I am incomplete as I am. That I am not enough as I am. Therefore, I need to overcompensate for that false belief through external approval, through external jobs, through external love. Do we want to use our relationships? Do we want to use every moment asking ourselves, what do I want to experience? What do I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on the experience of loving everyone as they are? Or do I want to focus on the experience of using my brothers and sisters to play roles in order to boost up the ego in its own self-fulfillment and its own self-pride and its own trying to perpetrate itself? And this is where we can get into idols too. And I want to take the time here just to read a few sections from the Course about looking at idols and what the Course has to say about idols. So the first section I want to read is from chapter 10 in A Course in Miracles, the text. And this chapter is called The Idols of Sickness, which is the introduction. It goes on to state, nothing beyond yourself can make you fearful or loving, because nothing is beyond you. Time and eternity are both in your mind and will conflict until you perceive time solely as a means to regain eternity. You cannot do this as long as you believe that anything happening to you is caused by factors outside of yourself. You must learn that time is solely at your disposal, and that nothing in the world can take this responsibility from you. You can violate God's laws only in your imagination, but you cannot escape from them. They were established for your protection and are as inviolate as your safety. God created nothing beside you, and nothing beside you exists, for you are part of him. What except him can exist? Nothing beyond him can happen, because nothing except him is real. Your creations add to him, as you do, but nothing is added as different because everything has always been. What can upset you except the ephemeral? And how can the ephemeral be real if you are God's only creation and he created you eternal? Your holy mind establishes everything that happens to you. Every response you make to everything you perceive is up to you, because your mind determines your perception of it. God does not change his mind about you, for he is not uncertain of himself. And what he knows, he can be known, because he does not know it only for himself. He created you for himself, but he gave you the power to create for yourself so you would be like him. That is why your mind is holy. Can anything exceed the love of God? Can anything then exceed your will? Nothing can reach you from beyond it, because being in God, you encompass everything. Believe this, and you will realize how much is up to you. When anything threatens your peace of mind, ask yourself, has God changed his mind about me? Then accept his decision, for it is indeed changeless, and refuse to change your mind about yourself. God will decide against you. Oh, sorry, my bad. I'm going to reread that. God will never decide against you, or he would be deciding against himself. And as we go into the idol section here, I want to read chapter 29, which is called the Antichrist, which is just another name for the ego or an idol. It starts off by saying, "What is an idol? Do you think you know? For idols are unrecognized as such and never seen for what they really are. That is the only power that they have. Their purpose is to obscure, and they are feared and worshipped, both because you do not know what they are for and why they have been made. An idol is an image of your brother that you would value more than what he is." So how often do we find ourselves using our brothers and sisters to make us happy, rather than just loving them however they seem to be, and accepting the happiness that I can choose instead for myself? I don't need my brothers or sisters to make me happy. I can choose the happiness within myself, and I can, from that acceptance, begin to accept and love my brothers exactly how they are. Going on here, it says, idols are made that he may be replaced, no matter what their form. And it is this that never is perceived and recognized, be it a body or a thing, a place, a situation, or a circumstance, an object owned or wanted, or a right demanded or achieved, it is the same. Let not their form deceive you. Idols are but substitutes for your reality. In some way, you believe they will complete your little self. For safety in a world perceived as dangerous with forces massed against your confidence and peace of mind. They have the power to supply your lacks and add the value that you do not have. No one believes in idols who has not enslaved himself to littleness and loss, and thus must seek beyond his little self for strength to raise his head and stand apart from all the misery the world reflects. This is the penalty for looking not within for certainty and quiet calm that liberates you from the world and lets you stand apart in quiet and in peace. An idol is a false impression or a false belief, some form of antichrist that constitutes a gap between the Christ and what you see. An idol is a wish made tangible and given form, and thus perceived as real and seen outside the mind. Yet, it is still a thought and cannot leave the mind that is its source. Nor is its form apart from the idea it represents. All forms of Antichrist oppose the Christ and fall before his face like a dark veil that seems to shut you off before him, alone in darkness. Yet the light is there. A cloud does not put out the sun. No more a veil can banish what it seems to separate, nor darken by one whit the light itself. And what it's really saying here is an idol is the desire for more. It does not matter more of what. More money, more fame, more love. If I only want more, using the reflection of the villain, of the seeming villain in the movie, his whole goal was what? Life is good, but it can be better. That is the definition of more. That is why the Big Bang seemed to happen. Seemingly, not really in reality, but seemingly in awareness. Because there was a false belief, the tiny mad idea that seemed to creep in, that the sun forgot to laugh. That maybe there was something more than everything. Maybe there was something more than wholeness. And then, seemingly, the mind fell asleep and seemed to dream of exile. But there is always a cost to these split desires. The wages of sin is death. The cost of these split desires is always unfulfillment, unhappiness, lack of love. He wasn't very happy. He was always quick-tempered, always looking for more. He was, totally disregarded his son. He wasn't very happy. And yet, the sweetness of what Leela was saying before is, I don't want to metaphysically ghost and claim to have no split desires when I do. And that's the most beautiful thing about forgiveness, is that you don't have to get rid of the split desires. The whole point of forgiveness is just being able to observe the ego calmly, being able to observe these split desires calmly, and then going, is this actually what I want? Do I really need my partner to stop snoring before I can be happy? Do I really need more money in the bank to be peaceful? And there's that change of heart. Just through asking that one question, there is that availability and that space to allow that change of heart. To be able to go, maybe I don't need that. Maybe, just maybe, even if I got what I wanted on the form, I would still be miserable because I would be onto the next carrot, chasing the next carrot that the ego has dangling in front of me. And this is the sweetness. And this is the core of the ego. And yet you being beyond the ego always have a choice, always available to accept yourself as you truly are. You know, why do we love Diana and Wonder Woman so much? Because she represents our invulnerability. She represents the true self that we are, that is invulnerable, that is loving, that is the feminine nature of the gentleness of the spirit and the fruits of the spirit. And it is the love that saves. It is the love underneath when a child says, I already love you. You have always been number one. You never needed to impress me. And that is the same of what Spirit or God or the Holy Spirit, whatever word you want to use, is saying to you right now. You can relax. You can relax your mind from all of the pursuits. You can rest here with me. You can let go of the perceptual pursuits, more money in the bank, better looking, bigger, better, more. I still love you. Is that not enough for you? God says. I love you so immensely that even if you had a whiff of the love I had for you, you would fall to your knees and you would begin to cry. You never needed to change yourself. You never needed to improve yourself spiritually to be perfect. You already are perfect. The true self you are beyond the ego is already perfect. We are beginning to look at our original innocence, your original innocence. Where religion looks at original sin, there has to be something prior to that original sin. And that is original innocence. It is saying to Simba, it is Simba realizing that he never killed his father, that he has always been innocent. And everything was just based off a misperception, a lie, in which he could take his rightful place as the heir of Pride Rock. Or in spiritual terms, you could remember yourself as the effect or the child of source, the child of love, the child of light in which you rightfully are. You are not bound to the laws of space and time. You are bound to the law of love because love is what you are. And the law of love meets all of your seeming needs in the dream because that is how much you are loved. That is how much the one self is always providing for itself. One never needed to work for money in order to be abundant. One just needed to remember one's true self as the abundance beyond the mental conditioning of the ego, everything that we have been taught in the world of how we are lacking and we need to have a good career in order to get good lasting income, in order to have the best houses, in order to gain the approval. This was all based of a false premise, a lie. Yet it is the love which undoes everything. It is the love which undoes the ego, which never really existed, and all of its false effects. As soon as you say, I renounce my wish, all of the false effects of the ego are undone in that moment. Just as the missiles were dissipating in the movie, the walls were crumbling. That is what God does. God breaks down the walls and he allows abundance, which was demonstrated, the river coming through as a symbol of abundance for everyone. No one needed to have anything to themselves. It was always just that shift in purpose that mattered. the love underneath the ego that mattered. And this is the experience that we are going into, that the mind is remembering. It is the experience of unconditional love. It is the experience of that singular desire. And that singular desire can be restated as a desirelessness for a particular condition, a particular form outcome, or for more of anything in the world, because you are complete already. And the peace, the love, the joy, the fruits of the Spirit are not conditional. So you don't need to have money in the bank in order to experience peace, because having money in the bank in order to experience peace is the condition that the ego was placing upon who you already are. That is the trick of the ego. It projects what is a present experience out into a future goal of your beloved changing. They should not be snoring. I need sleep so I can be peaceful and work functionally tomorrow. That's one purpose, which is okay if you choose that. That is the split purpose. But on the other hand, the Spirit is saying, but beloved, I love you exactly as you are. And you are here to extend my love to all of your brothers and sisters. And as you accept my love for you, you will love and accept yourself, and this will radiate to you and to everyone around you, because you will love and accept everyone else because you love and accept yourself. You have accepted the love and acceptance of God within, rather than seeking for it without. And it is the love, which is why I love Wonder Woman so much. It always brings it back to the divine love, the divine safety, the divine providence of I love you already. You never needed to change. You never needed to improve. All of those split desires, they weren't even yours. They were just the ego's split desires, and the ego doesn't exist. That is why you are divinely innocent, because you never had a split desire. There just seemed to be the experience, the seeming experience of the false effect of that split desire and awareness. But really, the ego never existed. So you never actually needed to get rid of the ego to be perfect. You just needed to be able to look calmly at the ego, recognizing that it is not you, recognizing that it does not exist, in which the true self reveal itself to you. As soon as you see the falsity of the ego, you step out of the ego. And the true self and the experience of love, wholeness, gentleness reveals itself to you as who you truly are. And this is where the fulfillment comes in, because you accept your own fulfillment, you accept your own self as you truly are. The purpose of the ego and looking for it externally has been washed away from your holy mind. And so I just wanted to finish off here by reading one last section from the Course, which is chapter 30. And the title of chapter 30 that I will be reading is Beyond All Idols. And it starts off by saying, idols are quite specific, but your will is universal, being limitless, and so it has no form, nor is content for its expression in the terms of form. Idols are limits, being conditions. They are the belief that there are forms that will bring happiness, and that by limiting is all attained. It is as if you said, I have no need of everything. This little thing I want, and it will be as everything to me. And this must fail to satisfy, because it is your will that everything be yours. Decide for idols and you ask for loss. Decide for truth and everything as yours. What was Diana saying? I wanted nothing except the truth, and the truth is beautiful. That's what Diana was saying at the end there. And it goes on to state, it is not form you seek. What form can be a substitute for God the Father's love? What form can take the place of all the love and the divinity of God the Son? What idol can make two of what is one? And can the limitless be limited? You do not want an idol. It is not your will to have one. It will not bestow on you the gift you seek. When you decide upon the form of what you want, you lose the purpose, you lose the understanding of its purpose. That's very beautiful. And this is crucial to remember. Because as soon as you decide upon any form, yes, I want this meal over this meal because this meal is going to bring me happiness. You lose the understanding of its purpose. And what is that purpose? It's forgiveness. It's about overlooking the form. It's about overlooking the illusion. You know, when the body of Jesus was being crucified on the cross, he overlooked the form. He did not perceive error. He did not perceive himself as being attacked. Instead, he said, forgive them. They know not what they do. Even in the extreme example of the body being crucified, here was still a demonstration of forgiveness and love. Because he had accepted the one purpose of forgiveness, which is still a metaphor. In heaven, there is really nothing to forgive. But while the mind believes in the ego, then we can use the metaphor of forgiveness here. And I'll read that again. When you decide upon the form of what you want, being the split desire, you lose the understanding of its purpose, which is to bring you peace through forgiveness. So you see your will within the idol, thus reducing it to a specific form. Yet this could never be your will, because what shares in all creation cannot be content with small ideas and small things. Behold, the search for every idol lies the yearning for completion. Wholeness has no form because it is unlimited. Now that is beautiful, because now we are beginning to touch on the fruits of the Spirit. You know, whenever we think of an idol, we think of like an image or like a totem pole, a physical totem pole. But what is being conveyed here is that an idol is the desire for more of anything in the world. It is an idea. It is a false belief on the mental level rather than a totem pole on the physical level. Which is why it is so important to be able to look at your mind, because what you do comes from what you think. This is the purpose of an idol, that you will not look beyond it to the source of the belief that you are incomplete. Only if you had sinned could this be so. For sin is the idea that you are alone and separated off from what is whole. And thus, it would be necessary for the search for wholeness to be made beyond the boundaries of limits on yourself. It never is the idol that you want. But what you think it offers you, you want indeed and have the right to ask for. Nor could it be possible it be denied. Your will to be complete is but God's will, and this is given you by by being his. God knows not form. He cannot answer you in terms that have no meaning, which is why whenever you have a split desire for a form goal, you experience lack of peace because it has no meaning. And your will could not be satisfied with empty forms made but to fill a gap that is not there. It is not this you want. Creation gives no separate person and no separate thing the power to complete the Son of God. Completion is the function of God's Son. He has no need to seek for it at all. Very sweet. Very sweet. And I'll just read one last line here. It says, thoughts seem to come and go. Yet all this means is that you are sometimes aware of them and sometimes not. An unremembered thought is born again to you when it returns to your awareness. Yet it did not die when you forgot it. It was always there, but you are unaware of it. The thought God holds for you is perfectly unchanged by your forgetting. And that basically means is that the true self, who you truly are, love, can never be changed. Just as the white movie theater screen is always unchanged by what image may be projected onto it, so do you remain unchanged by what you seem to play out within the movie. And that's very beautiful because it is here, looking upon the split desires of the ego, which are all false, and having a change of heart, having a change of seeing, realizing that you do not want those anymore, is where invulnerability is remembered. And it is the love that saves. It is the love in which you truly are. That is the most precious experience. And that is what spirituality is all about. But except I'm going to reinterpret it as the false belief of needing to get rid of an ego to experience love, to just being able to see the false as false, being able to look upon the ego, see it as false, see it as illusory, in which the love that you are shall reveal itself to you. And a beloved wrote in a day or so ago, and they said, what do I do when someone seems to be seeing error in me, offering me advice when I didn't ask for it? Just because I am having symptoms, etc. And that's very beautiful because just as Jesus on the cross did, through looking at the mental level, attack or, attack is on the level of the mind. And so when Jesus, the body of Jesus, was seemingly being crucified, because Jesus, in his mind, had overlooked or seen what was false, seen the false as false, he did not even perceive himself as being attacked because he knew he was beyond the images. He knew he was beyond what was a false effect of the ego, being the separate self. And so he overlooked that and said, Father, forgive them. I know not what they do. He remembered love for everyone. He was demonstrating the remembrance of love and overlooking the images, overlooking what was false, to extend that love in the most extreme examples. So one, now, during this point in time, has a most extreme example in which forgiveness can be applied. And everything that we seem to experience day to day today, being on the form level, a lot lesser than a crucifixion, allows us to remember that, hey, what I'm going through now is not as extreme, so I can still give that idea of forgiveness until it is not needed anymore. Until I remember that there is really nothing to forgive. because God has never condemned, and that the ego was never real. So I never needed to get rid of anything. I was just reawakening, seemingly, to the self that never slept, the self that has always been awake. And I am that mind awake.